Today's short flight is a tricky one. We're going to fly from New Haven Airport to Hartford, and we are going to take off from runway 2 and fly directly to the Madison VOR. We are then going to head off on a bearing of 31 degrees to our initial approach fix at WeGot, and then we are going to fly a tricky approach to the airport, which is called an LDA, a Localizer type Directional Aid. We're going to take off from New Haven. We'll be on runway 2, and then we'll have to make a right turn towards the VOR over here. From the Madison VOR, we'll turn onto a 31 degree radial, and we'll fly for 14.3 DME. At WeGot, our initial approach fix, we will turn left and we will fly the tricky LDA to runway 2. Let's have a look and see what that entails. So we're going to come down here, and then we're going to get onto this chart, and we're going to have a look at this chart, the LDA to runway 2, in more detail. From Madison, we will be flying to WeGot, and that will be at 14.3 DME on the 31 degree radial of Madison. And at that point, we will turn left. Lomas is our final approach fix, and we will know that we are there when we get to the 280 radial from this VOR called Hartford. So we'll set our second CDI to this VOR, and we'll watch to see when we hit its 280 radial. By the time we get to Lomas, we need to be at 2,200 feet. Then from Lomas, we will fly to Dans, and we need to be at 680 feet at Dans. Know when we get to Dans? Well, when we pass the 325 radial from the Hartford VOR. We have also been told that from Lomas, it'll take us 4 minutes and 33 seconds to get to our missed approach point, and that's at 70 knots in the Cessna, where we should be going down at 430 feet per minute. Once at Dans, we will descend to our MDA, which is 460 feet or 443 feet above the runway. We'll probably set that to 500 because you can't set the Cessna to 460. When flying an MDA, you can be 100 foot above, but you can't be 1 foot below, or you'll fail your instrument rating. When we get to our MDA, we are going to come in from this angle. So when we break out of cloud, we will see the runway, but it'll be to our left, and we'll need to correct for that and to land. You can see from this diagram how our LDA is offset. So when we set our nav radios, we're going to set nav 1 to the Madison VOR, and we're going to set nav 2 to the Madison VOR. In the backup frequency, in nav 1 we're going to have the Localizer frequency, and in nav 2 we're going to have the Hartford VOR frequency. And as we fly, you will see why we need to do that. Hopefully we won't need to fly the missed approach, But if we do, we must climb on the runway heading to 2,500 feet and turn on a 90-degree bearing towards Rambo, where we will hold. So let's talk about speed and altitude. We're going to start off at the airport at full power, and we'll probably go 900 feet per minute up to our 3,100 altitude, which is the MSA for the area. We will then stay at 3,100 feet for the first half of this leg, and then we will descend to WeGot, where we want to be at 2,200 feet. We probably have to go down at 500 feet per minute, which corresponds to about 2160 RPM on the power. Okay, once we get to WeGot, we're going to start configuring. So our RPM will go down to 1700, 1800, and below 110 we'll pull out flaps 1, and gradually as we slow down below 85 we will pull out flaps 2 and 3. So we need to get down to Lomas at 70 knots fully configured. Lomas to Dans, I'm going to go down at 800 feet per minute, and I'll have to set the RPM to about 1450, and then as I level off, bring it back up to 2200. From Dans to the MDA, I'll only go down once that altitude has stabilized. I'll set the vertical speed to 500 feet per minute, and the RPM will be about 1800 until I get down to the MDA, which is 460 feet, and then I'll level off at a power of 2200 RPM. Okay, let's prepare the aircraft. First of all, I'm going to center the heading bug on the runway heading. I'm then going to set up the autopilot because I'm going to use flight level change, and I'm going to use heading mode, and then I'm going to set my radios. In nav 1 I want 110.4, which is the Madison VOR active, and on standby I want the Localizer 109.7. In nav 2 I will also put the Madison VOR active, and then in standby the Hartford VOR 114.9. At the bottom under PFD I'm going to turn on DME, and in bearing 1 I'm going to put nav 1, and in bearing 2 I'm going to put nav 2. Remember, in nav 1 I need this 031 radial away from Madison, and I need the Localizer to get me into the runway. In nav 2 I need the Hartford VOR to tell me when I am at certain points along my course. So let's set the course in VOR 1 to 0031, which is that radial we spoke of. Then under time ref I'm going to set my baro minimum to 460 feet, and I'm also going to make sure I know how to use the timer, which we're going to need. And you can see the minimums here in yellow at the bottom of the altitude tape. On the PFD I'll set up my Navigraph chart so it won't help us with navigation. I forgot to set my initial altitude, which is 3,100 feet, which is MSA for the area. So I'll follow the flight director, and at 400 feet altitude I will put the autopilot on. So I'm going to turn my heading bug to this blue arrow here, which is the nav 2 bearing pointer. now we're heading straight for Madison, and you can see from my DME here that I'm about 8.9 nautical miles away from it. The blue bearing pointer arrow can move a little bit, so keep adjusting the heading bug to keep on course to the VOR. So as I reach my altitude, I'll wait for the flashing alt to stabilize, and then I'll turn my power down a little bit to about 2,400 RPM so that I can maintain a speed of 100 to 110 knots. So as we arrive at Madison, the arrows will start jumping around, and I will turn my heading bug to the 031 course, which is the green arrow. So there it goes. I'll move my heading bug to 031, and then once I'm stabilized on 031, I will let the nav take over and guide me on the 031 radial from Madison. So you can see I'm a bit left of the path. I'm going to turn my heading back a little left to give it some help. You can see I'm still in heading mode, but as the line comes across, I'll put it into nav mode, and you'll see VOR at the top, and then it should align with that radial. Flight Simulator goes a little bit crazy, but it eventually stabilizes onto the 031 course. So we stabilized on the 31 radial from Madison. We've got 14.3 DME to WeGot. I'm going to descend to 2200 feet, and I'm going to move my nav to radio to Hartford. So I'm going to use vertical speed to get down to 2200, and I'm going to set it for about 500 feet per minute. As we descend, I'll bring the power back so that we don't overspeed. When we reach 2200 and flatten out, I'll bring the power back up to maintain my cruising speed. We're about 5 DME from WeGot, so I'll switch nav 1 over to the Localizer frequency, and then I will switch nav 2 over to the Hartford VOR. Fast forward, and you can see that the Localizer is armed, and that we're waiting for the to become established on that Localizer. You can see from the map in the top left that we were almost there. There we go, heading is gone and lock is flashing, and once we established on it, it will stop flashing. So remember, we'll know we're at Lomas when we reach the 280 radial from Hartford, and we'll know we're at Dan's when we reach the 325 radial from Hartford. So now I'm waiting for the blue arrow's tail to go up to the 280 mark, which I've marked with the heading bug. So by Lomas, I want to be configured, and my speed must be down around about 70 knots, and I'm going to dive and drive from Lomas down to 700 feet. I also need to start my timer at Lomas. So from this map you can see from Lomas to Dennis I've got to descend pretty rapidly. I've got to start my timer because you can see at 70 knots it's going to take me 4 minutes and 33 seconds to get my missed approach. And if I don't see the runway in that 4 minutes and 33, I've got to go missed. So now as the blue tail of the arrow comes up to the marker, I'm going to get ready to start my timer, which I'll need to start as that blue arrow gets to the 280 radial. So there we are, we've arrived at Lomas. I'm starting my timer and I'm going to start my steep dive down to 700 feet. As I dive at about 800 feet per minute, I'm going to need to slow down. I'm going to pull my power back to about 1400 RPM. As I descend sharply, I'll know I've hit Dan's when my blue arrow pointer gets to the 325 radial. Once I get to Dan's, I'm going to descend to my minimums of 460 feet, but the Cessna can only go in hundreds, so I've set it to 500 feet. My timer's at 4 minutes. I'm going to dive down to Dan's and then I'm going to look out the window. So there's my offset runway way over to the left, so I'm going to have to make quite a turn to the left and then land.